No. My sound is actually here. I'm just joking with you. I wanted to kind of play a little game for you. After school, we have open house actually today. Probably by the time you watch this video, it might be a year old, a couple years old, but still tonight we have an open house, 2012. Kind of interesting. I'm going to see if I can find this video later. So anyways, what I'm doing is I'm going to make some videos, and what I want to talk about today is complex numbers. And so we've been talking previously, or at least in my other videos, depending on where you came and found me or what you've previously watched, we've been talking about find the solutions of an equation or a function. And one of the functions that now I want to talk about is, let's say I have x squared plus 1 equals 0. Now, to solve this by using the square root property, what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate my square root, and therefore I have x squared equals -1. Now, to isolate that x, I need to undo the squaring, so I'm going to square root both sides, and I get x equals the square root of -1. And then, I got a problem, right? Because what two numbers multiplied to give me -1? Well, there aren't any problems. So this is what we call imaginary. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But the reason why I gave it a red I is because simply we have I represents the square root of -1. So I is what we're going to call our imaginary parts. And when we take an imaginary number and you combine it with a real number, what we have is complex numbers. So complex numbers, and that's exactly what they are. They're really just a combination of a real number, which we'll call A, plus another real number B times an imaginary part, which we call I. So this is what we call a complex number. This is also in standard form. A is the real part, and B is going to be your imaginary part, where A and B are real numbers. B cannot be 0 if you're going to have your imaginary part, because if B equals 0, you wouldn't have an imaginary number, right? You just have a regular real number. And so whenever we have a number that we have a real part and an imaginary part, we call them complex numbers, and that's your standard form. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, but the main important thing you need to understand is A represents your real, BI is going to represent your imaginary part. Remember, the I is going to represent some imaginary solutions, because we don't know what the square root of -1 is, because we don't have a solution set for that in the real number system. So that's why we give it our imaginary number system. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed. Have any questions? Comment below. Thanks.